This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Lessons Learned. My guest today is Deena Nyer Mendlowitz. Did I get it right?
You did.
Wonderful. I'm terrible with names, even when they're right in front of me. Um, and Lessons Learned takes many different paths, and the path we're taking today is about, you know, how we got to where we are today. And along the line, that doesn't mean that we are happy every single day, that we are aware of even our feelings some days. Um, it's that big word that a lot of people refuse to accept called depression, but it's real. And I have suffered from it. I still do suffer from it. I have it mostly under control, but sometimes it will just come out of nowhere, and I need the people around me to give me my space. And Dina not only has suffered from depression, but she's a comedian who talks about depression. So, Dina, tell us a little bit about your backstory. What brought you to talking about it and talking about it in a comical way?
Yeah, it's something that I've lived with for the majority of my life. And I started doing comedy about 20 years ago and was first doing mostly improv comedy. And then I wrote a play with the local actress and playwright Anne McAvoy called Funnel Cakes Not Included, which was a one woman show about living with depression. And Anne played me in the show. And after that, I wanted to find ways to continue to talk about it. And so I created a show called Mental Illness and Friends, which is like a live comedy talk show. And every guest performs, and then we talk about what it's like to live with mental illness, whether it's depression, or I also live with suicidal ideation or anxiety or OCD. And it was just a way, if you use humor, it's a way in the door for some people to be able to listen to stuff that's harder and not as pretty. And humor can kind of lead you into that place. So that's what I wanted to do.
So you said you've lived with it most of your life. Do you remember when you really put a name to it?
Yeah, so I lived with suicidal thoughts for a majority of my life, and then uh, right before I graduated college, like 5 days before, I tried to end my life. This was in 1999, and I hadn't, seen a therapist or talked about depression or anything before then. And then after then was trying to figure it out. And for a while, we thought I was having the suicidal thoughts because I was depressed, but it was kind of the reverse. The constant thoughts were making me depressed. So it takes a while to figure out the disease. I've had so many diseases given to me and taken away from me, diagnoses that aren't it, and I continue to work to figure it out. But the main stuff is suicidal ideation and anxiety, and then depression.
So this is the first time I've heard of that diagnosis. Um, so is this something that therapists are now just realizing that has always been around, but we just never put a name to it?
I mean, I think it's been around, but yeah, I didn't get diagnosed with chronic suicidal ideation till maybe 2014. Um, but I think so often we thought both mental health professionals and individuals that suicidal thoughts were because of something. And I think we so often connect them to depression, which I think they're just as often, if not more, connected to anxiety, and we don't talk about that.
Well, we tend not to want to talk about any of it, to be very
Yeah.
honest. And I'm sure you've been down that road. Um, I know I realize now that I grew up with depression, even though we never put a name to it. My parents just called me a very sensitive child. Um, and then even as a young adult, I was considered to be anxious, a little OCD, and any other label, but nobody wanted to use the word that I had any form of mental illness. And about 10 years ago, I went to the doctor and I told him exactly what I was feeling and said, I need a label so that I can work through it. He said, what do you think the label is? And I said, I'm depressed. I'm just not a happy person and I want to be happy. And he told me he didn't have any magic pills, you know, but he said, coming face to face with it was the first step. However, a lot of people around me didn't want to accept it. Was why are you making something up? Did you ever get that reaction from people when, you were feeling the way you were?
Um, I mean, I think that uh, when people can't see something, they don't always believe it. And so I think that there was, questioning of what is this thing we can't see, and what's going on, and how do you tell people, that this is real. And I think it's more too, it's like an ongoing disease. People are okay with something that's finite, and I need your help here, this is going on, but to really be helpful in an ongoing thing is sometimes very hard for people.
So, how supportive was your family during all this and even to today?
So I have a lot of support in my life, and I'm very grateful for that. And I think some of the support you get, you have to educate people what you need and how you need. That's always going to be part of it. And so, especially with a invisible illness, I think people need to know how they can be there or whatever. I have a lot of friends who are very supportive, and family too, and yeah, I'm lucky that way. I've definitely been in hospitals and in other situations where there's been other patients who don't have the level of support I have.
And that's one of the reasons I really push to do some of these podcasts because the more we talk about it and the more open we are, uh, those whose claim, you know, like you said, it's invisible. I don't see it, so I don't get it. So why can't that person just put a smile on their face and get on with the day? Um, but when they hear it from a number of us, they start to realize, wait a second, you know, this this must be real.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
I remember my mother's reaction. We went to visit her. She lived in Michigan, and I went to tell her that I was now being treated for depression. And she said, why would you be depressed? You're married, you have a child, you have two children, you have a
Hmm.
good job. And I just looked at her and I said, it's not about any of those things.
Hmm.
And there are days I can pinpoint exactly why I'm feeling the way I am.
Yeah.
There are other days, and I'm sure that I cannot pinpoint it, and I just have to accept that I don't know what it is today that's bringing me down and making me spiral, but I have to find a way to climb out.
Hmm.
So, how do you climb out of the spiraling down?
Um, I think first of all, having a relationship with a therapist and somebody I can check in with. I think opposite action is a big principle, which is from dialectical behavior therapy. So, not waiting to feel like you want to do something, but doing it instead. So, whether that's taking a shower or going for a walk, or which I am always reluctant to do, and it does help every time, but I forget that. And choosing some sort of opposite action. And it doesn't make things magically better, but it sometimes gives some relief and helps you get through the day better.
And, I think it's interesting when you brought up going for a walk because last spring and summer, I was recovering from knee surgery and I had to walk every day. And I felt good walking. And come winter, I didn't realize why I was getting so down. Um, because walking outside in nature, listening to the birds, feeling the air. It changed my chemistry, if not for
Mhm.
the whole day, for parts of the day. And so during the winter, it finally dawned on me I needed to do something to change. Um, and like you said, it was an opposite reaction. No, I don't want to go for a walk, but you know what? If I go for a walk, I can get some relief.
Mhm.
It's like some people can take, 2 aspirin and, their headache goes away.
Right.
Uh, but it doesn't work for all of us. So I know you just did a comedy show, I believe this past weekend.
Yeah, it was the first time I was back on. I did two shows this weekend, but one I was just emceeing a show, and the other show I was an actual live show, which was the first live show I've done since February 2020, and that was just so great to be in a room. And I mean, you get it's like anything else, and you get endorphins from it, from being on stage, from having the laughter, from having that sort of stuff, and it's really I I hadn't been depressed in a long time. I had been having pre-pandemic. I had been struggling with suicidal ideation and anxiety, but depression hadn't been part of the mix. And then the pandemic hit, and all my coping resources went away. Performing is a coping resource for me. I teach preschool, and I love being with little kids, and that went away. And that was a coping resource for me. Being around people in general, I'm somebody who needs that and who kind of thrives off that. It just all went away, and so a level of depression hit. And I, during the pandemic, I was in two mental hospitals and one treatment centers, which was like a 30-day program to make it through this time, because I just the the combination of the depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation was just too much,
Well, and this last year has been difficult for even those who are extremely healthy. Uh,
without a doubt.
and I know that a lot of seniors have um, started early dementia because of
Mhm.
the pandemic, um, which is a very, very scary thought for many of us because, like you said, and I'm like you, I love being around people. Um, it wasn't until I think it was November um, that I went back to my secondary job, which meant I was out in the public. And as terrified as I was, um, wearing gloves to work and, double face masking, it changed my whole attitude. It made me feel like, there was life around the corner.
Mhm.
And things are getting better today.
Mhm.
But um, it opens our eyes to how important support and friends and having people around us is. Uh, so tell me how you look forward to the future. I read something, I think it was on Facebook, that um, you had thought about taking your life, you purchased a gun, but somebody helped you out of that situation. Can you explain that?
Yeah, this was 5 years ago today, and I was just in an awful place. The suicidal ideation was just really intense, and I went and I'd never touched a gun in my life. I was able, which is ridiculous, to buy a gun in 28 minutes. And I then wound up calling my person who was my therapist at the time, and we made a plan. And I wound up returning the gun the next day and going into the hospital. And I've got, I have a kid who's 14 now, who was 9 then, and the fact that I've gotten to witness these 5 years of his life, you know, is an amazing gift. And yeah, there's no point in which you can't say, help. It can be after, you make these choices, but you have to, at some point, hopefully the words help will come out for you. And it's a hard thing, and I'm lucky. I had a therapist who was able to respond to my phone call, and when I called and that sort of stuff, it was at night or whatever, and she had a number actually that you were able to text at or whatever. But people, it's a privilege to have a therapist and somebody who returns, and that's the thing. It's it's easier to purchase a gun than it took then 8 hours to get admitted to the hospital. So look at that. Took
Uh-huh.
28 minutes to get a gun and 8 hours to get into the hospital. So that needs to not be the case.
Absolutely. And I think people need to listen to our words more carefully. Um, and, we may be kicking and screaming when they listen to us. Um, for a long time, my anger would come out by making the threats that I didn't want to live anymore. Um, and I now realize those were threats for attention because I never had a plan and never actually saw what it would do to me or to anybody else. Um, and I woke up one morning and said, I can't say those words anymore because somebody's going to believe me. And yes, I probably do need the help, but I need to use the right words. And so for the last 10 years, I've been learning how to explain how I feel when I feel a certain way. Therapy has helped me as well, although I don't think I've ever had as good a therapist as it sounds like you had. Um,
Yeah, it's actually interesting that there wound up being a rough ending with that therapist, but I have an amazing therapist currently who I'm very, very grateful to have. So, but I'm grateful that therapist helped me through that moment.
and I
Yeah.
think it's important that people understand too that it's okay to change doctors, change therapists, um, if if you're not finding your comfort zone.
Hmm.
And we've been going through this uh, with my son, who is now experiencing um, post traumatic stress syndrome, which are things that he never talked about. And all of a sudden, um, just as we started this series, it it came out of him, and I'm almost grateful for that because he's now facing it, and he's working on those demons.
Hmm.
And I think it's important that people understand that how real this is. We're not making it up. Because I don't think anybody wants to feel sad all the time.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm going to go back to your son who was 9 years old at the time.
Hmm.
Is he aware of what happened when he was that age?
Um, about is it about a year ago or so, I told him about it. I was at, at the time somebody was doing a article on me for the USA Today, on this relationship I have with this woman Susan Messing, who was a friend who lives 500 miles away, who helped me a lot when I wasn't well. Um, and I didn't know, I knew that was going to be part of the article, so I wanted him to know. So, but he had actually, there was another article about it, that the plain dealer had done. So he had been googling something else and had seen the title of the article. So he knew something but didn't know everything. So I told him, you know, in this past year about it, and that's the hard stuff. Talking to him about depression or anxiety is easier to do when you have somebody who you care about and love so much and want to live for, and then them to know that you have suicidal thoughts is rougher, because I don't want him to ever think he has to take care of me in any way or be scared in any way, like any parent.
Absolutely. But the conversation is something that we have to have so that our family, our children totally understand. Um, and I've had those conversations with both of my sons. Um, and like I said, my youngest son has been very open about the things that he's been through as well. Um, and sometimes it's the thing that a parent doesn't want to hear. You don't want to hear that your child has been suffering. You don't want to uh, know that your child has had suicidal thoughts, or maybe even attempted suicide, which my son did try to do when he was in college. Um, and just as he was about to do it, he thought of his two very young cousins who he was a role model for. And he said, and that stopped him. And uh, he said he's grateful that he loves them as much as he does. So it is real. There are therapists out there. There are groups out there. Um, and I also have noticed that a lot of comedians do suffer with depression. Um, have you done any kind of research into that?
I actually did a show with a guy who had done a lot of research about it and was talking about it. I think the thing is, it's two, to me, it's two parts. One is that comedians talk about everything, so they're more likely to talk about it than others. And then I also think we're surprised when something like Robin Williams happens. We're surprised that somebody who made us laugh so much was in so much pain, which is probably the reason they did make us laugh, because they knew what deep pain felt like. They wanted relief, that sort of thing. But I think we get so jarred by it. But I mean, when I do the show Mental Illness and Friends, I never have a hard time finding comedians who have depression or anxiety. And maybe it's, part of the reason they do comedy too, is it's a way to have a coping resource and that sort of thing.
Well, it's interesting because for the last couple of years, I've been doing a podcast with many of the comedians who um, come to hilarities. And it's interesting in talking to so many of them that they will refer to, um, this helps them get out of their depression. Um, they may not want to get on stage. They may feel, like the world is falling apart. But like you said before, doing something the opposite of the way you feel.
Yeah. Oh, if I only went on stage when I felt like it, I would never perform. And that was the thing about Mental Illness and Friends, is I would be like, I'd make a show date and go, well, you have to show up for that. But even this last Saturday, I was like, why did I say yes to the show? I don't want to do this. I'm like sitting there about to go on, and then you go on and it's great. But yeah, yeah, if I only went on when I felt like it, I'd never set foot on a stage.
So, as I asked before, I'm going to ask it again. Pandemic is sort of winding down. Um, we're all supposed to be a little happier and smiling. What advice can you give to somebody who says, uh, I just don't feel like smiling? I just I feel rotten, but I can't tell you why.
Yeah, I mean, I think one, like we always, a lot of times we think the opposite of depression is happiness, but really the opposite of depression is healthy. And so if we're depressed, it means that some part of us, whether it's by seeing a therapist or going on meds, or building up our coping resources, um, that's always been a strategy for me. It's doing any of those things, but I think it's also acknowledging, we there's this part when the pandemic's going on where we go, well, I can be depressed because this is going on, it makes sense. And then it lifts, and you go, well, now I shouldn't feel this way, I should just feel grateful I get to have reentry. Well, you can be grateful and depressed. I'm grateful and depressed all the time. Every day I can give you a list of 1,000 things I'm grateful for. So I think it's giving yourself a break and getting rid of the shoulds of, I shouldn't be this way or I shouldn't be this way. It's just saying, these feelings are data. That's what they are for us. I'm feeling this way, I need to get help. I'm feeling this way, I need to be easy on myself and gentle. I'm feeling this way, I need to find a plan for reentry that feels good for me.
Such great advice because I will tell you about 30 days ago, I started noticing amongst many of my podcasters that I'm working with, Um, they were on top of their game for the year and, you know, weren't missing a show and they had great guests and everything was going fine. And then all of a sudden I'm getting these phone calls saying, I don't think I can do this anymore. You know, I, I'm just, I'm not in that frame of mind. And I would ask, I mean, that's okay. I get it. But do you know why? And of course, none of them knew why. And the more phone calls I got, um, the more down I felt. And uh, that's when I met Reverend Rachel, and we talked, and she was telling me about her book. And what it reminded me of is that we do go through cycles, and um, it's okay if you have to say, "No, I can't do that. No, I'm not ready." But we need to know why, and sometimes it takes a while to know the why. Um, I was allowing all those phone calls to make me get down until I realized, wait a second, there's a way I can crawl out of this. Um, I have other people out there who want a podcast, and I'll just keep going. Um, and then all of a sudden, I started to crash and realized I needed to take a break. So it's listening to ourselves,
Yeah.
listening to our body. Uh,
Look, it's like any other disease. You have arthritis and you don't get to choose when it flares up, you know? And then you have to find out, why is this flare up? Is it just happening because it is? Is it happening because of something I'm eating, because of the weather outside? What's going on? And you don't blame yourself for having that flare up. And we have to start treating mental illness like what it is. It's a disease, and it's going to be in remission, and it's going to be active. And when it's active and not in remission, we have to figure out why. And sometimes that takes a while, but the most thing we have to do is be compassionate towards self.
Absolutely. Well, as we all continue our journey, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Of course.
Thank you for your story. I want to see you on stage because um, I noticed on Facebook we have some mutual friends and they talk about your humor. So now it's like, okay, I'm going to watch for the next date that you're performing and we'll make sure we get there. And I will introduce myself to you and thank you for your kind words.
Sounds great.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye bye.
Thank you.